2024 is almost halfway done. As we near the midway point of this year, I realize there are many standalone books that I want to finish, but I haven't gotten around to reading them. So I thought it was fitting to make a video where I talk about 10 standalone books I want to finish before 2025. Some of these books have been on my TBR for several years, but I finally want to get around to reading these books and go into 2025 with no regrets. So let's just get into it. One book I've been wanting to read for 3 years. I tried to read it in 2021, but I gave up because I got distracted. But I'm finally going to finish Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin. Abner Marsh, a struggling riverboat captain, suspects that something's amiss when he is approached by a wealthy aristocrat with a lucrative offer. The hauntingly pale, steely-eyed Joshua York doesn't care that the icy winter of 1856 has wiped out all but one of Marsh's dilapidated fleet. Nor does he care that he won't earn back his investment in a decade. York's reasons for traversing the powerful Mississippi are to be none of Marsh's concerns, no matter how bizarre, arbitrary, or capricious York's actions may prove. Not until the maiden voyage of Fever Dream does Marsh realize that he has joined a mission both more sinister and perhaps more noble than his most fantastic nightmare, and humankind's most impossible dream. Fever Dream is George R.R. Martin's take on the vampire novel. I will possibly never read A Song of Ice and Fire. I read A Game of Thrones years ago, realized that George R.R. Martin's probably never going to finish the series, and lost motivation to continue onward. But I've heard good things about Fever Dream. It's very underrated. Not a lot of people talk about it on BookTube, but riverboat captain, vampires, kind of a Western feel, that sounds right up my alley. I plan on finishing this in the next 2 months or so. The next book I'm going to talk about is literally the first book I ever added to my TBR. I had just started reading fiction as an adult. I stumbled across a Reddit post about this book and it sounded very intriguing, but I was intimidated by it because it sounded a little complicated. And this book is The Years of Rice and Salt by Kim Stanley Robinson. It is the 14th century and one of the most apocalyptic events in human history is set to occur: the coming of the Black Death. History teaches us that a third of Europe's population was destroyed. But what if the plague had killed 99% of the population instead? How would the world have changed? This is a look at the history that could have been. One that stretches across centuries, sees dynasties and nations rise and crumble, and spans horrible famine and magnificent innovation. Through the eyes of soldiers and kings, explorers and philosophers, slaves and scholars, Robinson navigates a world where Buddhism and Islam are the most influential and practiced religions, while Christianity is merely a historical footnote. Probing the most profound questions as only he can, Robinson shines his extraordinary light on the place of religion, culture, power, and even love in this bold new world. I read the premise to this book about 6 years ago, and it has grabbed me ever since. The idea of the Black Death completely decimating Europe as opposed to just crippling it, thus changing the course of history, and living in a present where Islam and Buddhism are the two main religions, and there's a bunch of other things connected to that, that's so compelling to me. I loved history growing up, I still love history, and this history nerd, if I don't read any other book on this list, I will read this book, for sure. The next book I'm going to talk about has been described as Moby Dick in the West with Buffalo. And of course I'm talking about Butcher's Crossing by John Williams. It is the 1870s, and Will Andrew, fired up by Emerson to seek an original relation to nature, drops out of Harvard and heads west. He washes up in Butcher's Crossing, a small Kansas town on the outskirts of nowhere. Butcher's Crossing is full of restless men looking for ways to make money and ways to waste it. Before long, Andrew strikes up a friendship with one of them, a man who regales Andrew with tales of immense herds of buffalo, ready for the taking, hidden away in a beautiful valley deep in the Colorado Rockies. He convinces Andrews to join in an expedition to track the animals down. The journey out is grueling, but at the end is a place of paradisical richness. Once there, however, the three men abandon themselves to an orgy of slaughter, so caught up in killing buffalo that they lose all sense of time. Winter soon overtakes them, they are snowed in. Next spring, half insane with cabin fever, cold, and hunger, they stagger back to Butcher's Crossing to find a world as irredeemably changed as they have been. One of my favorite YouTubers ever, Man Carrying Thing, loves this book. He has mentioned it several times throughout the years. He even has a video that's over an hour long where he talks about Butcher's Crossing. It is incredibly brutal. It takes place in the West. It's about killing buffalo. It's about hubris, trying to conquer nature. And I'm a nature lover. We almost made the buffalo go extinct. This book sounds very compelling to me, and Man, Carry, and Think has some pretty exquisite taste in literature. I can't wait to read this book and see what the hype's about. The next book I'm going to talk about is a massive book. Easily the longest book I will read in 2024. It has tie-ins to The Dark Tower, which is one of my favorite series, and I've been told that I have to read this book to get the full Dark Tower experience. And that book is The Stand by Stephen King. Damn, that's huge. This is the way the world ends, with a nanosecond of computer error in a Defense Department laboratory, and a million casual contacts that form the links in a chain letter of death. And here is the bleak new world of the day after. A world stripped of its institutions and emptied of 99% of its people. A world in which a handful of panicky survivors chooses sides, or are chosen. A world in which good rides on the frail shoulders of the 108-year-old Mother Abigail, and the worst nightmares of evil are embodied in a man with a lethal smile and unspeakable powers, Randall Flagg, the Dark Man. The Stand is considered by many to be one of Stephen King's best works. The problem is, it is incredibly intimidating. I have attempted to read The Stand twice, not with too much effort. I gave up perhaps 10, 15 pages in because I just got distracted by other works. This book will definitely kill your momentum. I think the audiobook is over 40 hours long. It is well over 1,000 pages, but Stephen King is my favorite author. And I have to read The Stand. I have to. It's going to be challenging, but it's going to be worth it. And I can't read The Wasteland, the next book in The Dark Tower, until I read this book. So that should be enough motivation to finally get this doorstopper out of the way, and I think I'm going to love the journey. The next book I'm going to talk about is from one of my other favorite authors, a book that is very underrated, especially in the United States. And that book is Nation by Terry Pratchett. When a giant wave destroys his village, Mao is the only one left. Daphne, a traveler from the other side of the globe, is the sole survivor of a shipwreck. Separated by language and customs, the two are united by catastrophe. Slowly they are joined by other refugees, and as they struggle to protect the small band, Mao and Daphne defy ancestral spirits, challenge death himself, and uncover a long-hidden secret that literally turns the world upside down. Nation is one of the last books Terry Pratchett wrote before he passed away. Upon completion, he said, "This is the best book I have ever written," and that is a vote of confidence. I'm not quite sure what this book is about besides the little blurb I read in the synopsis, like in the description, but if he says it's his best work, and I've loved everything else I've read from him, I imagine this book is going to floor me. The next book I'm going to talk about is a funny horror novel about vampires, and that book is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Patricia Campbell's life has never felt smaller. Her ambitious husband is too busy to give her a goodbye kiss in the morning. Her kids have their own lives. Her senile mother-in-law needs constant care, and she's always a step behind on thank you notes and her endless list of chores. The only thing she has to look forward to is her book club, a close-knit group of Charleston women united by their love of true crime and paperback fiction. At these meetings, they're as likely to talk about the Manson family as they are marriage, motherhood, and neighborhood gossip. This predictable pattern is upended when Patricia meets James Harris, a handsome stranger who moves into the neighborhood to take care of his elderly aunt, and ends up joining the book club. James is sensitive and well-read, and he makes Patricia feel things she hasn't felt in 20 years. But there's something off about him. He doesn't have a bank account. He doesn't like going out during the day. And Patricia's mother-in-law insists that she knew him when she was a girl, an impossibility. When local children go missing, Patricia and the book club members start to suspect James is more of a Bundy than a beatnik. But no one outside the book club believes them. Have they read too many true crime books? Or have they invited a real monster into their homes? The only other work from Grady Hendrix that I have read is Ankle Snatcher, a short story he released on Amazon. I enjoyed it. It was a very humorous take on the boogeyman that lives under your bed. If the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires is as compelling and humorous as it sounds, and I enjoy the ride, I think Grady Hendrix might be one of my new favorite authors because I love silly horror. That's why I love T. Kingfisher. If Grady Hendrix is half as good as T. Kingfisher, I'm pretty sure I'll enjoy this book immensely. The next book I'm going to talk about is going to hit me in the feels. Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. In me are the memories of a boy's life. spent in that realm of enchantments. These are the things I want to tell you. Robert McCammon delivers a tour de force of storytelling in his award-winning masterpiece, a novel of Southern boyhood growing up in the 1960s, that reaches far beyond the evocative landscape to touch listeners universally. Boy's Life is a richly imagined, spellbinding portrait of the magical worldview of the young, and of innocence lost. Zephyr, Alabama, is an idyllic hometown for 11-year-old Corey Mackinson, a place where monsters swim the river deep and friends are forever. Then, one cold spring morning, Corey and his father witness a car plunge into a lake, and a desperate rescue attempt brings his father face to face with the terrible, haunting vision of death. As Corey struggles to understand his father's pain, his eyes are slowly opened to the forces of good and evil that surround him. From an ancient mystic who can hear the dead and bewitch the living, to a violent clan of moonshiners, Corey must confront the secrets that hide in the shadows of his hometown, for his father's sanity and his own life hang in the balance. I just got chills reading that description. It was either Boy's Life or Swan Song from this author, but I thought since I was already reading The Stand, I didn't want to push my luck by reading two giant post-apocalyptic novels in the same half of the year. But Boy's Life sounds super compelling. I think I'm definitely going to cry. Any books where it's about like father-child relationships hit me in the feels. I didn't grow up with a father figure, but now that I am a father, books like that definitely make me cry. I think this book will bring tears to my eyes. I think it's going to be an amazing journey, because I've heard great things about Robert McCammon. But I'm sure I will love this book, and then I'll read Swan Song sometime next year. But yeah, Boy's Life sounds like my cup of tea. The next book I'm going to talk about has been getting a lot of love on BookTube. I've heard it is perhaps the best self-published fantasy novel written in recent memory. And of course I'm talking about The Sword of Kagan by M.L. Wong. On the mountainside at the edge of the Kaiganese Empire lives the most powerful warriors in the world, superhumans capable of raising the sea and wielding blades of ice. For hundreds of years, the fighters of the Kusanagi Peninsula have held the Empire's enemies at bay, earning their frozen spit of land the name the Sword of Kaigan. Born into Kusanagi's legendary Matsuda family, 14-year-old Mamoru has always known his purpose, to master his family's fighting techniques and defend his homeland. But when an outsider arrives and pulls back the curtain on Kaigan's alleged age of peace, Mamoru realizes that he might not have much time to become the fighter he was bred to be. Worse, the empire he was bred to defend may stand on a foundation of lies. Misaki told herself that she left the passions of her youth behind when she married into the Matsuda house. Determined to be a good housewife and mother, she hid away her sword, along with everything from her days as a fighter in a faraway country. But with her growing son asking questions about the outside world, the threat of an impending invasion looming across the sea, and her frigid husband grating on her nerves, Misaki finds the fighter in her clawing its way back to the surface. When the winds of war reach their peninsula, will the Matsuda family have the strength to defend their empire? Or will they tear each other apart before their true enemies even reach their shore? After reading that description, all I could say is, that sounds epic. I love Asian-inspired fantasy. I love the idea of a middle-aged mother being one of our protagonists. That's kind of cool. I can dig that. I love the whole family unit stands against impossible odds in a story. That hits me in the feels. Family over everything. I've heard nothing but great things about this book. I imagine after I read it, I will love it. Emma Wong has recently published another standalone book, so maybe if I love this book, I'll read that book. But yes, I'm sure this book is going to be a masterpiece, because I would feel pretty bad about myself if I was the one person on BookTube that read this book and did not love it. The next book I'm going to mention is considered a Southern Gothic masterpiece, Blackwater by Michael McDowell. Blackwater is the saga of a small town, Perdido, Alabama, and Eleanor Dammert, the stranger who arrives there under mysterious circumstances on Easter Sunday, 1919. On the surface, Eleanor is gracious, charming, anxious to belong to Perdido, and eager to marry Oscar Caskey, the eldest son of Perdido's first family. But her beautiful exterior hides a shocking secret. Beneath the waters of the Perdido River, she turns into something terrifying, a creature whispered about in stories that have chilled the residents of Perdido for generations. Some of those who observed her ritual in the river will never be seen again. I instantly added Blackwater to my TBR after Mike from Mike's Book Reviews mentioned it. I love Southern Gothic literature. I've heard that the character work in this book is amazing. It is a story that spans several generations, several decades, familial trauma, familial curses, small town. There's a lot to love there. I'm probably going to read this book in October because that's the month to read horror reads, but I'm feeling a little antsy. I might read this book way before October, but we'll see what other books get in the way. But Mike from Mike's Book Reviews, he's never led me astray. His book recommendations always work for me. I imagine Blackwater will be no different. There's not a lot of people that mention this book on BookTube, but I think it's getting a lot more attention as of late. And I can't wait to be one of the new people who read this book and love it, because I'm sure I will love it. The last book I'm going to talk about is the one I'm the least sure I'm going to love. I've heard great things about it, but I'm not sure if it's my usual cup of tea. And the book I'm talking about is The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. In 1972, when workers in Pottstown, Pennsylvania were digging the foundations for a new development, the last thing they expected to find was a skeleton at the bottom of a well. Who the skeleton was and how it got there were two of the long-held secrets kept by the residents of Chicken Hill, the dilapidated neighborhood where immigrant Jews and African Americans lived side by side and shared ambitions and sorrows. Chicken Hill was where Moshe and Chona Ludlow lived when Moshe integrated his theater, and where Chona ran the Heaven and Earth grocery store. When the state came looking for a deaf boy to institutionalize him, it was Chona and Nate Timblin, the black janitor at Moshe's theater and the unofficial leader of the black community on Chicken Hill, who worked together to keep the boy safe. As these characters' stories overlap and deepen, it becomes clear how much the people who live on the margins of white Christian America struggle and what they must do to survive. When the truth is finally revealed about what happened on Chicken Hill and the part the town's white establishment played in it, McBride shows us that even in dark times, it is love and community, heaven and earth that sustains us. This book sounds really good. It sounds inspiring. It sounds like it's going to hit me in the feels. But why am I hesitant? Usually, when books are talking about race relations, I feel like the authors don't do it in a very nuanced way. Most books I've read that are centered around race relations, I kind of have a very lukewarm reception to it. I remember for years I was being recommended Sula, and I finally read Sula by Toni Morrison, and it was just 5 out of 10 for me. It was just okay, just satisfactory. I'm hoping The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store is not like that. I hope that I love this book. I hope that it changes my mind about books that are centered around race relations. But of all the 10 books on this list, I'm the least sure about this book, but I hope I am proven wrong. So there you have it. Those are the 10 standalone books I want to read before 2025. The last half of this year is going to be lit. I look forward to reading all these books. I look forward to going through all the emotions, going through all these journeys, meeting all these characters, being immersed in these amazing stories. I think the last half of 2024 is going to be amazing. Follow my reading vlogs if you want to follow me as I read these books, along with all the other books I'm reading for the rest of this year. It's going to be a great year.